Let's get into it. The first Sunday of the 2023 NCAA tournament. It is in the books, which means the Sweet 16 is now set. There were 8 games on Sunday. We're going to touch on most of those, if not all of those, before we're done. But I do want to start with what was, I feel like, the game of the day. Kansas State, Kentucky in Greensboro, standalone window on CBS. It's America's most watched network. It's a network of stars. Final score, KSU Wildcats 75, UK Wildcats 69. Marquise Noel, he had 27 points, 9 assists, 3 steals, just made one big shot after another in the second half. So now, after being picked last in the preseason Big 12 poll, Jerome Tang is in the Sweet 16 of the NCAA tournament in his first season as a Division I head coach. It's incredible stuff. Kyle Boone, was Kansas State over Kentucky the most entertaining game of this NCAA tournament so far, or is there something else in competition with it?
I think it was definitely the most entertaining. I think people look at probably this result and think, oh man, that's a little bit surprising. But you watch this game, Kansas State kind of had more talent than Kentucky. Felt like they were a little bit better coached. This was not a fluky outcome. Kentucky was a slight betting favorite in this game. And so people, it's like number 3 seed ousting a number 6 seed. And it seems like, oh, that seems reasonable. But the way that Kansas State did this was very, very impressive. Marquise Noel was fantastic in this game. He had 23 points, 23 of his 27 in the second half. Thought it was really interesting. Marquise Noel was asked about the Kentucky matchup after Kansas State won its first round game. And he had 2 words. He said, kill him. That's all he said, was just kill him. And it was awesome to see him back it up. First team all confidence is Marquise Noel. Thought he was really, really good. Had 27 points in this game, 9 assists. Keontae Johnson, only 5 of 14 shooting, and yet Kansas State is able to come out with a win. I think there's probably more questions on the Kentucky side, obviously, about John Calipari and this Wildcats program, but really good win. Really, really impressive stuff from Kansas State from Jerome Tang.
I'm glad you brought up Kansas State's talent as it compares to Kentucky's talent, because Jerome Tang also brought it up in his own way after the game. It was in a media scrum, I think, after his more formal post-game press conference. Here's what Jerome Tang had to say when he was talking about the 40 minutes his team had just played against Kentucky.
Jerome, how much of a statement is this for you in your program? First year, beat a program like Kentucky, and you're going to New York to play in the Sweet 16.
Well, we have a program that's rich in tradition also. And like all those old dudes that played for Kentucky, they ain't coming back, right? Tradition does not help you if you don't get out there on the floor and play with some dudes. And we had more dudes than they did today. And that's what that was.
So this is interesting because I think you can reasonably argue that he's correct. I mean, if we were putting all of these players, in fact, let's do it. Let's put all of these players in a college basketball draft. Who are you taking first overall?
After what we saw today?
In today's game, you would take Marquise Noel. I got it. But broadly speaking, who are you taking first?
Yeah, you take Oscar Tshiebwe first.
That's fair. Okay.
Yeah.
But are the next 2 Kansas State players? Are the next 2 Marquise Noel and Keontae Johnson? Probably, right?
They are. Yes.
For college basketball, we're not doing an NBA draft, but for college basketball, you could argue that 2 of the best 3 players on the court, not 2 of the best 3 players in today's game necessarily, but 2 of the best 3 players on the court were Kansas State Wildcats. So what I find most interesting about this is, like, how did we get here? Because Kentucky was a preseason top 5 team that was getting first place votes in the AP poll. They had another heralded recruiting class, the reigning national player of the year. Meantime, Kansas State was literally picked last in the Big 12. How did, to use Jerome Tang's words, KSU end up with more dudes than Kentucky?
Right. Yeah. How does Yale out-rebound Baylor? It's wild. It's wild. I mean, and maybe we're having a different discussion if Antonio Reeves doesn't go 1 of 15 shooting, but when the guard that you kind of rely on as your sharpshooter has an off day, that can happen. Cason Wallace was awesome in this game, 21 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists. But the talent level and I think the difference between the 2 programs was pretty stark. I mean, Noel was fantastic and took over this game. He was the best player in this game. by far. And it's kind of interesting. I think Kentucky's kind of stuck in a spot where they're not entirely sure which avenue they want to build their rosters, because under John Calipari, they historically have obviously built under the one and done model. They've had, John Wall and Marcus Cousins, Anthony Davis, yada yada. The list goes on. And I think they've kind of course corrected in a way that is more traditional and in line with how teams are building the rosters now. They're going through the transfer portal, and they've added, I think, some pretty valuable guys like Jacob Toppin, who've been playing big minutes. Reeves has been playing big minutes, but the talent level that they're getting out of the portal is not commensurate with Kentucky expectations, I don't think, and that has generally bogged down this roster and bogged down the postseason successes that typically they would have under John Calipari and under Kentucky. So that's kind of a long-winded explanation, in my view, of how things have gone from pretty good under John Calipari to like, wow, is this guy like maybe on the hot seat entering next season? It's pretty stark to watch.
Yeah, like I agreed with the philosophy of trying to get older through the transfer portal. I thought it was pretty clear in recent years that the whole let's just get a bunch of young 5-stars and see where we I'm not saying it wasn't working, but it had stopped working as well as it once did. And so I agreed with the philosophy about getting older via the portal. I just wonder if they got the right guys, because
Right.
like they added experience and age, but how many high level guys did they actually add? Kentucky level guys did they actually have? Because when you looked at this roster once the season got going, it was perhaps we all misinterpreted it on paper, including, by the way, the computers that had I think Kentucky was preseason number 1 at KenPom, right? And so it wasn't just humans misinterpreting what Kentucky had as much as it was everybody misinterpreting what Kentucky had. And because as the season unfolded, it became clear that maybe they can be good, but it appeared to me at least pretty, I don't want to say early, but certainly by January, I was not out on Kentucky completely, but I was out on the idea of Kentucky ever being great. I just didn't see the pieces that were going to allow them to be great. And so the good news, if you're a Kentucky fan, is that they have another influx of talent coming in from the high school ranks. They've got the number 1 recruiting class in the country. It's 4 5-star prospects. It's the player ranked 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 9th in the class of 2023, most notably Justin Edwards, DJ Wagner. So they are going to have what we come to know as Kentucky talent in the program again next season. So perhaps that'll be the type of thing that, gets Kentucky back to competing for Final Fours and things like that. And oh, by the way, I know the perception out there is that Oscar Tshiebwe is done with college basketball. And I'm not even saying that it's an incorrect perception. I don't know why he would be done with college basketball. Where is he going? Like, do you have him projected as a top 60 pick right now?
No,
neither would I. All right. So like I kept reading today, like it's Oscar Tshiebwe's last game as a Wildcat. And I'm like, are we sure? Are we sure? Like, even if he thinks he's sure, are we sure? Because what he is going to find out, if he doesn't already know it in the coming days and weeks and months, is that he is not a draftable player. And with name, image, and likeness being what it is, I don't even think it's a reasonable thing to suggest, as much as it's an undeniably true thing to say, he can make more money playing college basketball at Kentucky next season than he can make playing professional basketball anywhere next season. So just keep an eye on that. It might end up where he's just out the door and he's ready to be done with it. But if he is basing his decision on finances, then the smart thing to do, because he has another year of eligibility because of COVID, the smart thing to do is to come back to Kentucky and play another season. And if you can put that guy with all these young guys, then maybe Kentucky gets back to looking like a team that can compete for Final Fours and national championships, because Kentucky, regardless of the preseason rankings, both in the human polls and the computers, they never really looked like that team this season. And then, I guess it might sound like we're putting this all on the roster and the play. Like maybe there's some coaching adjustments that need to be made as well, because I was in studio tonight, CBS Sports Network, with Roy Hibbert and Shelvin Mack, two former NBA players, and they both noted how when Kentucky's first action doesn't get them where they want to be, that it just really looks messy after that. You know, they like the offense is, there's been a lot of terms to describe it this season. I don't know which one's exactly right. And I should note that the offense is not it's not as terrible statistically as it is visibly, as it is like when you watch it. It looks old, and it looks like it doesn't look the way a modern flowing offense looks, but it still ranks top 20 in the country in adjusted offensive efficiency according to KenPom. But I had two former NBA players tell me like that just does not, there's so many problems with what they're doing that needs to be fixed. And so maybe that's a project for John Calipari, whether it's staff changes or just new ideas. It does look like there's some coaching stuff that needs to be fixed there as well. The last thing I'll say about Kentucky, and then we'll get back to Kansas State, and then we'll move on. I've been on set for like 3 hours, like live on TV for 3 hours. So I'm just sort of keeping my eye on Twitter, but I haven't had time to consume much of anything. But I saw a tweet from the Field of 68, and I don't know what they said. So because I didn't have time to listen, but those guys are my friends. I don't bring this up for any other reason than I thought it was an interesting way to phrase it. The tweet was Kentucky's season a disappointment? And I don't even know how you could answer no to that. Of course it was. It's a preseason top 5 team, number 1 at KenPom, projected to win the SEC. They don't win the SEC. They struggle, to a degree where they were unranked for, large portions of this season. They finished 3rd in their league, and then they're out in the round of 32. There's no way there's no other answer to that question. Was Kentucky's season disappointing? Then, of course, it was disappointing, right?
Yeah, of course. I've got a screenshot pulled up here of our Final Four predictions from the preseason. You had them in the Final Four. Norlander had them as his title pick. I had them as my title pick. David Cobb rightly stayed away. Jerry Palm had them as the national runner-up. So that was legitimately preseason expectations for this Kentucky team. They were clearly top 5 team coming into the year. And yet, as the season went along, it's like, we need to readjust expectations. This is not maybe the Kentucky team that we expected. Still, by any reasonable measure, I think this Kentucky team underperformed, and not going to the Sweet 16, not being a real factor in the SEC race. For Kentucky, for John Calipari, this falls well short of what I think Big Blue Nation has come to expect.
There's no question. Back to Kansas State. Marquise Noel was obviously the star of this round of 32 game. And it is players like him that really can capture the nation's attention. I don't know. I wonder how many people tonight just know the name Marquise Noel who didn't know that name yesterday, because he was on a standalone window on CBS and just bombing from all over the court. And like, he might be taller than me, but not by much. Like not much. Like I feel like I could post up Marquise Noel. Like I'd back him down and I'd ask for the ball, and I feel like I could maybe score. He's a little guy, but boy, he's an awesome college basketball player. Just a treat, fun to watch. And in this NCAA tournament, he's now averaging 22 points and 11.5 assists through these 2 games. And according to Jared Burson, who is the father of ESPN Stats and Info,
that's right,
Noel is the first player to average at least 20 points and 10 assists in 2 games en route to the Sweet 16 since 1989. Shouts to Taylor Swift. It's a long time since anybody's done anything like what he's doing so far. And I know that I tweeted that after the regular season, I would have voted Bill Self as my national coach of the year. But like we explained when we were talking about national player of the year, we do not actually at CBS Sports vote on that until after the Elite Eight. And with Kansas eliminated in the round of 32, with Marquette and Shaka Smart eliminated in the round of 32, I think it's very possible that I don't want to speak for anybody else, that I will get to a point where by the time it's time to cast a ballot at CBS Sports, I can see myself casting it for Jerome Tang at Kansas State. First time Division I head coach, inherits a program that lost a lot last season, remakes the roster through the transfer portal, picked last in the Big 12 preseason poll, and then gets a top 3 seed in the NCAA tournament and takes it to at the very least, the Sweet 16. Like, that's National Coach of the Year stuff. And when we vote, he might be number 1 on my ballot.
Yeah. I think I would agree with that. We'll see what Houston does with Kelvin Sampson.
Yes,
I think he will be in the mix. Nate Oates.
That's the thing. I don't know if people are going to be able to. I was about to say pull the trigger on but that's not the right thing to say. I don't know if people are going to. I wonder if all of the stuff around the Alabama basketball program will prevent some people from voting for Nate Oates, because like Nate Oates should have been the SEC Coach of the Year. He just should have. Yes. Like, Alabama was picked 5th in the SEC, and they were the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament. Like, Nate Oates should have been the SEC Coach of the Year, but he wasn't. It was Buzz Williams and Jerry Stackhouse. So clearly there, at least SEC media had an issue voting for Nate Oates. But if you don't have an issue, if you just want to say, hey, man, I'm not worried about anything other than basketball stuff, I don't care about nothing else, then Nate Oates is totally reasonable. You could vote for him for National Coach of the Year. So we'll continue that conversation down the road.